Okay, so welcome everyone, and at today's Mindfulness UK session, we thought we would do a rain practice. But first of all, we're just going to do a little bit of settling, just so we kind of land and participate in a relaxed and calm way. Maybe just letting go a little bit of whatever the business of this morning has been. So I'm going to invite you all just to find a comfortable seated position and just gently close your eyes or lower your gaze, whatever's comfortable to you. Just looking to bring your attention gently and kindly to the breath, and just see if you can follow it as each breath arises and passes through the tip of your nose. Just follow it down into your chest as you have that slight rise and fall of the chest, and then watching as the breath passes back out through the nose before the next breath arises. And just settling into that. If you're arriving and you've been quite busy this morning, or you're feeling quite emotional, it can sometimes be helpful just to take maybe 3 deep breaths, just to calm and focus the body. But after that, we're very much looking just to allow the breath to arise and pass in its natural rhythm. So we're not trying to control it, simply following with our awareness what's actually just unfolding in our body. Just noticing the breath arising and then passing. In that quiet moment of stillness, that sort of pregnant pause before the next breath arises. And if any thoughts arise, just noticing that as well. Just naming the thought. Maybe planning mind if it's planning for the future, or remembering mind if it's thinking about the past. And just giving a little inner smile that we've noticed the thought arising, but just then gently letting it go and bringing the attention back to the breath. We're not trying to push the thoughts away, we're just seeing them, naming them, but just choosing to keep the awareness on the breath. And this is the practice. Just allowing our focus on the breath to just act as an anchor, to bring us to the here and now, to the present moment as it's unfolding. And maybe just now we're settled a little bit into the breath, whilst keeping our awareness on the breath, just feeling, how do we feel today as the breath arises, fills our body and then passes again. Just noticing how the body feels at the same time as each breath arises and passes. Knowing that there's no right or wrong, whatever is what's unfolding today. And it will change and pass. Other feelings will arise. That's the natural rhythm of life. And we just sit with it and notice it. And as we bring this landing practice to an end, just noticing if those words have caused any thoughts to arise in the mind. And if they have, just noticing that, the way that there's a trigger or an impetus and the mind does its thing, it produces thoughts. We can see those thoughts arise and choose to engage with them, or as we'll do just now, just notice them, but then give that little inner smile and return our attention to the breath just for 3 more breaths. Smiling that we've seen the way that the mind works, but just staying on the breath for these last 3 breaths. And then in your own time, feel free to just open your eyes and we'll come back together. You can maybe have a drink or a stretch if that's comfortable. And just while you do, I'm just going to read this by Jack Cornfield, which I think is particularly applicable when we start to really come into the present moment through the practice. When we come into the present, we begin to feel the life around us again. But we also encounter whatever we have been avoiding. We must have the courage to face whatever is present. Our pain, our desires, our loss, our secret hopes, our love, everything that moves us most deeply. So, I think you all know the rain practice, but I'll just do a very quick recap and then maybe we can do a guided practice together. So, the rain practice is really an extension of mindfulness. So with mindfulness, we're looking to bring our awareness and our attention to a particular object of attention, often the breath like we've just done, but it can also be the body or sounds around us, or it can be things like mantras or prayers as well. With rain, we do that, but we take it a slight step further. So we start by the R of rain, which is to recognize. So come into the present moment and we use that anchor, for example, the breath, just to land, and then we just recognize what's arising. Are there any emotions or feelings that are going on? The second letter, A, is to allow, so the second letter of rain. So we're not trying to push away whatever arises, we're recognizing it. Ideally, we're naming it. So we're saying, oh, I can feel sadness arising, or happiness arising, excitement arising, frustration arising, whatever it is, and we're just allowing it to be there. And that's really the first 2 steps of the rain practice. We then go into the I, which is to investigate. So we're doing this on a number of levels. So as we'll come to practice together, we start by just seeing if we can step slightly outside of the emotion or feeling or thoughts that are going on, and just see that as well as those going on, there are also other things going on. In particular, the breath is normally passing and arising. So it just allows us to step slightly outside of being just in the emotion or the thoughts and see that, oh, as well as that, there's other things going on. And just touching base with those can be really helpful, just to mean we're not completely swept up in the thoughts or the emotions. We notice that there's also the breath. And it's important that we're not trying to move away from the thoughts or emotions and just be on the breath. Just trying to widen the awareness so we can be aware of both, to see that there is a number of things going on. The investigation then continues with seeing, well, actually, as well as the breath, what's happening in my body? What is this emotion or these thoughts? Has that had any physical impact? And there may be nothing. There may very well be something. It may be some heat if there's frustration or tension. There may be a slight heaviness or a lightness, an excitement. So just noticing that as well. All these things are all happening together. So we're trying to widen the awareness to see the thoughts or emotions. Notice there's also the breath. Notice there's also the body feelings. And then having done that, we will generally find, not always, but generally find that we can then lean slightly into any one of those. So we can lean into the thoughts or the emotion. But if actually that starts to get a little bit uncomfortable, if we're feeling too triggered, then actually we can lean out of it a little bit. We can still be aware of it, but we can just put a bit more focus on the breath or the body sensations. And in particular with the body sensations, just noticing if they are changing, and indeed the breath. Is our breath speeding up? Is it tight? Is our body tighter? Or is maybe it starting to relax a bit? Or is there a different sort of movement happening in any of those? And once you've got that position that we can sort of slightly lean into the emotion or the breath or the body, then just investigate a little bit what's causing this emotion or these thoughts to arise. Is there any particular thing that's coming up? And can we just allow that to be whatever it is? Can we just see it and notice it and not try and push it away, but just say, oh, okay, I can see where this is coming from. Right now, my experience is these thoughts or these emotions, but I can also see my experience is the breath, and I can see it's the body, and I can, by observing, notice that actually there is a reason why that's arisen today. And knowing that as everything's changing, the breath's always changing, the body's always changing, and so this feeling, it may be there for 5 minutes, it may be there for an hour, it may be there for a day, but it will also in turn pass, because that's the nature of all things. And having got that perspective on whatever's there and accepted it and seen it, we then conclude with the N of rain, which is just to nurture ourselves a little bit. So we may be feeling a little bit tender from seeing what's arisen that maybe we didn't expect, or we hadn't noticed the strength of it. And actually just giving ourselves a little bit of care. It can be a few breaths of metta, loving kindness practice, or it can be just settling and just reassuring ourselves that actually this is just part of the experience of being human. These things, these feelings arise, these thoughts arise, it's what the mind does. And just acknowledging that and saying, we don't have to get so tangled up, we can just see that's what's happening now, and that's okay. And if that happened now and that's okay, then tomorrow something different will happen, and that will also be okay. Because actually we are okay. And just touching base with that. So, maybe if you're okay to do so, have a little drink or a little stretch and then settle back into that position you were in. And just gently close your eyes or lower your gaze, whatever's comfortable to you. And I'm going to ask you just to start by just bringing the attention back to the breath, and we'll just re-land a little bit. So just settling, gently closing the eyes or lowering the gaze, and just following the breath in its own natural rhythm, just settling back into that. And just remembering that the breath, this amazing anchor we all have, is always here. So if at any point you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed or over-triggered, whether now in the practice or at any point this week or in the coming weeks, just remembering that this is always here, this place of refuge, just to come back to. I can breathe. I can bring my attention back out of the thoughts and emotions to this breath, this place of refuge. And maybe just at the same time as we're breathing, just taking one hand and placing it on the chest and just physically feeling the body breathe as well as mentally being aware of it. And that can be really stabilizing and grounding, just to have that physical connection to the breath as you feel the chest or the tummy rise and fall with each breath, as well as following it with your awareness. Okay, so now that we've settled and we've got that rhythm and that place in the present moment, just going to invite you to bring to mind maybe a recent experience where you've been in something or something's happened which has caused a reasonably strong emotion to arise. Emotion or a feeling or kind of persistent set of thought patterns. Something that's triggered you and you've noticed the reaction, but looking for something a kind of a 5 or 6 out of 10 in terms of strength. So don't go straight to 10 out of 10. I don't want to over challenge anyone, but just something that you notice there was a reaction, but you feel it's one that is not so triggering that you can't manage it. Because we want to work with something we can manage today. And so think up whatever this situation was and just drop back into it. See if you can visualize what happened, who said what, or what you read, or how it unfolded. You see if you can drop back into that and see if you can bring and allow that emotion or feeling or set of thoughts just to arise again and just to come into your focus. And as it does, just seeing if you can recognize and name whatever the emotions or feelings or thought patterns are there. So have them front and central of your awareness. Just look at them, be aware of them, and see if you can recognize and name them. What's arising? And as you do that, just consciously being aware to avoid any temptation to try to push the emotion away. So we're looking to just allow it to be. It's what's arising right now, even if we've asked it to arise by thinking of this particular scenario. So we're going to allow it and recognize it and name it and allow it. And just sit and observe it. This is our reality right now. This is what's unfolding. And can we just be with it? And this in itself is a great step because we're very familiar with pushing away thoughts and feelings that we don't like. Actually, just allowing them to be can itself be very settling. And so now we're going to start the investigation by just seeing if we can keep this emotion or feeling front and central. Just noticing the breath is also arising and passing. Seeing if we can have maybe 20% of our awareness just clocking that breath, because it's also arising. Can we notice if our breaths are fast or slow, shallow or deep? Maybe if we lean a little bit back into the emotion more than the breath, can we notice? Does that change our breath? Does it make our breath speed up slightly as we get more caught up in that emotion or feeling or thoughts? And can we also just lean back a bit more into the breath and back into the emotion? And noticing how we have this ability to do that, where we put our awareness, where we put our focus, will cause different things to arise. We can choose where that is put. And then an invitation to just widen the awareness so that, as well as feeling the breath, we can just sense what's happening in our body. Are there any sensations arising? Is there any tension, any lightness or heaviness? Just seeing if we can be aware of that as well. So we've got the emotion or the feelings or thoughts, and then maybe 15-20% aware of the breath, and 15 to 20% aware of, oh, this is how my body is feeling when I have this emotion. And again, just seeing if we can lean a bit more into the emotion or the feeling. And then after a few minutes, maybe into the breath, a few minutes more into the body, and then just back into the emotion, just allowing them all to be, all coexisting together in this present moment. As we lean into the body, just seeing if we can drop deeply into whatever the feelings are arising in the body. Just noticing if they're changing or moving, or really what is unfolding. Just dropping deeply into that. And noticing if that has changed the emotion or the feeling in any way. Has that also evolved and moved or changed into something slightly different? Now taking the investigation a layer further, we're just going to ask the question and see what arises. But ask the question, what's causing this emotion to arise in this situation? We're just allowing the answer to be there and just seeing if we can be with that answer. No need to analyze it or rationalize it or discuss it. Just say, what is it that's causing this emotion? And can we just see that and be with that? We notice how that feels in the body. And as we sit and allow awareness to be on what's arising, can we invite the question, is there anything within us, is there any part of us that's trying to say something? Is there anything that we're overlooking that's causing these feelings, these emotions to arise? What are we believing about ourselves that may be causing these emotions? Can we maybe see that and allow that? But also recognize that it may or may not ultimately be true. Noticing the breath still arising and passing. Noticing the feelings in the body. And noticing the emotion or the thought patterns or the feelings, whether they're the same or whether they've now developed into something different. And can we just sit and allow that to unfold? That's the reality in this moment. And can we be okay with that? And can we recognize that just as each breath arises and passes, and just as sensations come into the body and then pass, so these thoughts or emotions or feelings will also pass, because that's the true nature of all things, always changing. We only be happy because we know not happy. We can only be sad because we know not sad. Part of the human experience is happiness and sadness, excitement, frustration, anger, peace. But if we can observe as these emotions and feelings and thoughts arise, we can see that they're not everything. They're just a passing cloud in the sky. And there's always the breath. There's always the body. So we'll move on now to the N of rain, which is a little bit of time to nurture, a little bit of self-congratulation that we've paused and leant into something that maybe wasn't that comfortable. It's not something we always do. But we've seen that that is there in our day-to-day. There's also the breath, there's also the body, and there's also the ever-changing nature of reality that whatever arose will change later today, in the next few minutes or hours. It's been caused by whatever conditions are present now. Those conditions will also change and produce new thoughts and emotions. If we can be aware of that, we can observe it with a sense of peace and understanding. We can feel it and not get swept away by it. We can consider whether we might want to respond in a certain way. There's no need to react blindly. Most of all, we can realize that this is not everything. However difficult or painful a particular emotion or feeling might be, there's always the breath, the body. We can open our eyes and see the trees or the greenery or friends or family around us. There are sounds arising and passing, beautiful sky, or maybe a powerfully angry sky, but the beauty of nature. Therefore, we don't need to be just consumed by that thought or that feeling. We can just notice it's part of what's arising today, but actually only a relatively small part. If we can be okay with that, then we can be okay with whatever arises next. If we can see that that is not everything, actually, whatever we might tell ourselves when we're swept up in that feeling is just more thoughts caused by the feeling. And actually, we can realize that we're okay. We're completely okay going through this life of different experiences. And actually, if we're okay, then everybody else is okay as well. And maybe moving on to notice that just as we can sense that this is part of the human experience for ourselves, and so it is for others. When we're happy, there will be others that are sad. And when we're sad, there will be others that will be happy. And we constantly move in and out of these phases because that is the human condition. And actually, if we can support ourselves, we can also support others. Because ultimately, we're all interconnected in this strange but magical experience of being human. And just for our last few breaths before we bring the practice to a close, just centering back in on the breath, arising and passing, always there like a anchor or a flag to remind us of the ever-changing nature of reality. This moment will never be the same again, and the next moment holds untold promise of what could be if we just allow them to unfold. Now, in your own time, just taking a few moments to have a stretch or a little drink, and just gently opening your eyes, and I'll stop the recording and we can come back together.